The EU AI Act is coming into play, I think, in August, the 2nd of August, 2025. So in a couple of weeks. This is a document, an act that they've been drafting, I think, for the last 2 years, for a very long time, because it takes a huge amount of time to draft it and then to get everyone to agree upon it. So that is coming into play in 2 weeks. And I'm sure there's a lot of fanfare, a lot of excitement in the EU about this regulation that they're putting out. So recently, Meta have said they will not sign the EU's AI Code of Practice. So this is slightly different to agreeing to the act itself, because, well, if you don't agree to the act, then you'll get fined if you operate in the EU. But this is a code of practice, which is basically saying, okay, I agree to these general terms. I don't think it's necessarily legally binding, but let me read through here. It's basically a show of good intent that, we agree with the guidelines that have been set out here, and we will act accordingly, and we will act well moving forward. Basically, Meta said, no, we're not signing that. So here we go. Europe is heading down the wrong path on AI. Meta's chief global affairs officer, Joe Kaplan, wrote in a LinkedIn post. This code, the code of practice, introduces a number of legal uncertainties for model developers, as well as measures which go far beyond the scope of the AI Act. And then Thomas, a spokesman for the European Commission, said AI model providers that opt not to sign the code of practice, will still have to comply with the AI Act and might be exposed to more regulatory scrutiny. So these are two different things. The code of practice and the AI Act will apply to everybody operating in the EU regardless. This code of practice is basically a way to say, okay, I agree with what you're doing. I agree, I will comply. You don't have to sign it, but if you do not sign that code of practice, then they're going to make sure you are watched very carefully under the AI Act. So it's going to be messy. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks. A lot of companies have started to push back on the AI Act. So here we go. Meta is the latest tech giant to criticize the push to regulate AI. Earlier this month, chief executive of European companies, including Mistral, which is a French, probably the biggest AI company we have in Europe, Mistral AI, ASML Holdings, and Airbus signed a letter asking the Commission to delay enforcement of the law, saying that overlapping and complex regulations were preventing the EU from becoming an AI leader. So basically, I believe, and I don't think this is very controversial, AI is now a two-horse race. We have the USA on one side and we have China on the other side. The EU basically removed itself from the game a couple of years ago by pushing forward with this EU AI Act, saying we're going to be the best regulators. We're going to come up with the best rules for AI. The problem with this kind of regulation is, as I mentioned, they started around it 2 years ago. AI has changed a lot in 2 years. A lot. There's no real way around this. Whatever policies are created, whatever laws are written, will very quickly become defunct because of the speed of artificial intelligence, because AI is just moving faster than anything else. So the big problem here is that any rules that are put down may inhibit companies from growing in the EU. And that seems to be the case already. Most companies are, going and setting up in San Francisco for this reason, because they don't want to be hit by these regulations moving forward. In a weird way, the EU AI Act doesn't really matter, because there isn't much of an AI industry here in Europe anyway. It's just going to affect the American operators and the Chinese operators probably less. The American operators are acting in the EU, and it's going to make it very unattractive for them. And so already when ChatGPT releases a new feature, the last people to get it is always the EU, because they have to go through additional hoops and hurdles. We might get to a point where ChatGPT releases a feature, let's say like extended memory, and it just cannot comply with the EU AI Act. And therefore, a company like OpenAI will just say, okay, users in the EU will not get this feature. I think that's probably where we're going to go. We already see huge delays on the rollout of features compared to America. I think at some point they'll just say, okay, you don't get this, which will just incentivize European users of AI to use VPNs, switch their accounts over to America. We can work around this kind of thing. It's just a bit of a pain. So at the same time, the EU is also saying we are going to catch up and we're going to build data centers and we're going to become the leaders in the AI world. So what they want to do is build these gigafactories. So AI gigafactories, basically a gigafactory it's using 1 gigawatt of energy. So that's why we call it a gigafactory. So they want to build a network of gigafactories to help companies train the most complex models. Those facilities will be equipped with roughly 100,000 of the latest AI chips, so H200 chips from NVIDIA, which is around 4 times more than the number installed in AI factories currently being set up. That's wrong. Okay. We have factories like Colossus, which is XAI's data center, it was set up initially with 100,000 GPUs. That has increased to, I think, 150,000 H200s, which are the workhorse. Sorry, H100s, which is the workhorse. And then I think they bought another 50,000 H200s. Don't quote me on that, but that was the last figure I saw. So we definitely have factories that have more than 100,000 GPUs. So if the EU are saying we're going to catch up by building factories that have 100,000 GPUs, they're already trying to catch up with what is out of date. So here we go. The European Commission is going to allocate 20 billion euros, so 23 billion US dollars, for the construction of 4 AI gigafactories across the bloc. So each of these factories will have 100,000 GPUs. I don't know what the timeline is for this. It's probably going to be a couple of years, but the problem is these are the size of the factories that are already being deployed. So if the EU takes a couple of years to build these factories, they're building what the Americans are currently using right now. So we have things like Mark Zuckerberg has announced his 2 new factories, Hyperion and what's the name of the other one? Prometheus, I think. They've got very cool names: Colossus, Hyperion, Prometheus, etc., etc. So Hyperion is a 5 gigawatt factory, for example. So it's 5 times the size of the factories that the EU are currently talking about. And the UAE are building a 5 gigawatt factory as well. The UAE's 5 gigawatt data center project could house up to 2.5 million GPUs spanning 10 square miles. The same with Mark Zuckerberg's one. So Hyperion is expected to be the size of Manhattan. So whilst the EU are playing catch up, the Americans and the Chinese are just going much larger. So whatever the EU is going to build in the next couple of years will be today's standard, which will not be enough 2 years from now, because we're going to need much larger arrays. We're going to need much larger data centers. We're going to need much more power to continue to train the model. Again, the EU is making the right noises. They are just 2 or 3 years late. And in the timelines of artificial intelligence, 2 or 3 years I think it's a lifetime. They're going to be so far behind. I don't know what the fix is there. I don't think there is a fix. Graham says, bad regulation will stifle innovation. They may have just killed AI startups in Europe. Yeah, I think that actually happened a while ago. Even with talk of high regulation, even with talk of AI, the AI Act, which doesn't come into play for another 2 weeks, that still added too much risk into the startup ecosystem. So it meant that anyone who was serious about an AI startup went to San Francisco, which means a consolidation of power, consolidation of intellect, consolidation of money, all happening in San Francisco and being pulled out from Europe. So again, I was at this event yesterday, I had my little guest pass at Google, and talking to a lot of AI startups here, and the amount of money that they can raise here. Pre-seed rounds tend to be like £1 million or a couple of £1 million, whereas a pre-seed round over in America is 10, 15 million. There's just a lot more money being thrown at the problems. And with AI, money helps. You need money for training. You need money for scaling fast. You need money for marketing. You need cash. So you can't move at the same speed if you start up here in the UK or you start up in Europe, because the investment is just not there. The investment is just not there because we have risks like the AI EU Act, which could just cut the legs out from underneath startups. So Mistral is the biggest homegrown EU AI. They're based in France. They are one of the people who can basically said to the EU, you need to push this back. This is going to hamstring us and we're not going to be able to compete anymore. They're the leading AI company in the EU. And I was in France last week, and talking to a bunch of AI engineers and AI startup owners. None of them are using Mistral because it's one, the ChatGPT models are still better. Sorry, Mistral. But two, they were not sure what the future of Mistral was going to be. So they did not want to build on a EU based platform. It was safer to build using ChatGPT than it was to use Mistral, which is not Mistral's fault. That is the uncertainty that comes from this regulation, which kicks in 2 weeks. So it's a problem, a big problem. And the problem is EU are highly regulating on one side, but also saying we want to be the leader in this. And I don't know how those gel together. I don't think their different divisions are talking much. What do you think of Grok and deregulation in the EU would be to make us more competitive? So I don't think we need to fully deregulate. I think it needs to be an attractive environment for investors and an attractive environment for startups. And as soon as you have this looming regulation, which has been looming for the last 2 years, and people do not know the impact of it, that adds uncertainty. When you have uncertainty, it's harder to invest. It's harder to build startups, not knowing what's going to happen in literally 2 weeks from now and how hard the EU is going to come down on AI companies for breaking the act. So because of that uncertainty, companies just leave. Companies are very mobile now, and there's no reason for them to be located in a particular place, especially if everything's being done in the cloud. So you just move to the US. So I don't think I don't think deregulation is going to help, because what they've done over the last 2 years is created so much uncertainty that the infrastructure and the ecosystem for artificial intelligence startups in the EU has not been built up, which means they are now 2 years behind. They're now talking about building data centers over the next couple of years, which match our data centers from today. So again, they're going to be 2 or 3 years behind. I don't know what the solution is in terms of catching up. I think it's done. I think it's over. And this is fully a two-horse race between the US and China. So the EU and the UK are out of the race, and there is no way to catch up. Don't want to be pessimistic, but from a realistic point of view, it's done. So it doesn't matter what they do with the act. It doesn't matter what programs they put forward. They're so far behind in terms of tech, in terms of investment in infrastructure, in terms of talent, that there is no catching up from this, especially if we start to move towards AGI, because whoever gets AGI first, artificial general intelligence, is going to win. Basically, they are going to make so much money that they will become the dominant player in not just AI, but business as a whole, and even broader than that. And we're not going to do it, not in the EU, not in the UK. Yeah, sorry. I just don't think there's any hope. But thankfully, we can use the AIs from America. So we can use them to build. It's just that Europe and the UK are out of the race in terms of building the foundation models and building the base models that everything else is based on. So presume the EU regs don't affect the UK. Is it just lack of investment? So the EU regulations from the EU AI Act will affect any company that wants to operate in the EU. So that's why. So it's the same with GDPR in a weird way. A lot of companies in the UK and globally will still apply GDPR rules because they want to have access to the EU market. If you want to have access to the EU market, you need to play by those rules. So a lot of people will just hit those levels of GDPR security in order to get access. It's going to be the same with the EU AI Act. If you want to sell, if you want to operate, if you want customers in the EU, you're going to have to play ball. Companies like Meta saying, I'm not going to sign your code of practice, they will still be under the EU AI Act. They're also based in Dublin. They have an EU base as well. But as long as they have users, as long as they have customers who are in the EU, they are going to be subject to regulation. And that's the same globally. So for UK and American companies. How many companies would you say care about being GDPR compliant with ChatGPT? I mainly talk to startups, and it is not a high priority, especially in the UK. I'm sure in the EU and in Germany, from the German entrepreneurs I know, it would be a much bigger deal. I think most people are focused on just building and trying to work out, get product market fit and start getting some revenue in the door. And they will comply with GDPR to the extent that they need to. But it is not, for most entrepreneurs, for most people starting a business, it is a checkbox activity that needs to be done, needs to be got out of the way, and then you don't think about it, or you try not to think about it as much as possible. It depends where you are, but that tends to be the case in the UK. As I say, our friends in Germany tend to be a bit more strict about it, because in Germany in particular, you can get fined, and you do get fined very quickly, whereas I have never heard of anyone in the UK getting hit by GDPR problems.